So now we know that President Trump has become the first president in history to be impeached twice. A dubious distinction, to be sure, but the politics of it all can't be ignored. First time it was done with zero support from Republicans. This time 10 members of the GOP crossed party lines to vote for impeachment. But what now as the process moves to the Senate? Joining me this morning to talk about impeachment, KPRC Legal Analyst Brian Wice. Good morning, Brian. Good to see you. What do you think is this process? How is it going to evolve going forward in the Senate?
Well, Cam, what we've seen compared and contrasted to right around a year ago during President Trump's initial impeachment, the House Judiciary Committee took weeks to draft and ultimately vote out articles of impeachment. What we saw over the course of the last week was a snap impeachment, as some members of the Republican Party have said, where the articles were literally drafted in a matter of hours and presented within a matter of days. So given the nature of this impeachment, the sequel, if you will, this is something that's been on the fast track, Cam.
I've heard several senators say they want to wait to hear the evidence before making a decision. Wasn't that already presented, or was that just, as you mentioned, a snapshot, maybe just the charges, and now more evidence is likely to come out in any kind of trial?
Well, you're absolutely right. I think our viewers recognize from the original impeachment a year ago is that what the House does is essentially draft a bill of indictment. That is to say that we believe that reasonable cause exists, that the president has committed high crimes and misdemeanors. It's nothing more than that. It's an allegation. It's an indictment. And it's incumbent upon the Senate, the world's allegedly greatest deliberative body, to determine whether or not to convict and remove the president. Of course, as our viewers well know, it takes a 2/3 majority or 67 senators. They are in a unique position, Cam, because they are not just witnesses to the alleged misconduct on the president's part. One can certainly make a compelling case. They're the victims. And I think anybody who's ever binge watched Law and Order on a weekend recognizes that you can't sit on a jury if you're a witness, let alone a victim, Cam.
You know, as this thing progresses, there are still some senators who are waffling about what they're going to do. As you know, this way it should be if you're going to be sitting as a juror in something like this, although, you know, in reality that doesn't happen. Any conviction would happen, though, after Mr. Trump leaves office. Is that legal?
And, you know, that's something above my pay grade. But scholars have determined, in fact, a distinguished University of Texas law professor in this Friday's New York Times pointed out that it is legitimate, not only because there is some precedent in terms of removing a former member of the cabinet generations and generations ago, but what matters is that the Senate can also determine, not by a 2/3 vote, but by a simple majority, whether or not President Trump can be precluded, prohibited, banned from ever seeking elective public office. And not just that, but if in fact they were to vote to ban him in that regard, under the Constitution, he could also be precluded from receiving his pension and all of the other perks attendant upon being a former president. So while the president's defense team will not only claim that this is too little, too late, I think that the House managers, the prosecutors, will make a compelling case based upon precedent and the literal text of the Constitution that the fact that the president is on the sidelines, as we say in TV, on the beach, doesn't make a difference, Cam.
So what are you hearing about the chances of a self-pardon or other pardons before this administration is over?
Let me say this, you know, with my GED in cosmetology, I've always been amazed at the concept of a preemptive pardon. That seems like, I don't know, government intelligence or jumbo shrimp. There's just something fundamentally wrong with it. But I think that the consensus is that if this president attempts to engage in a self-pardon, that will be challenged in federal court. This notion that any man can sit as his or her own jury, which again, going all the way back to the Magna Carta, has certainly not been permitted, is something that's going to occupy center stage if this president decides on the way out the door to give himself a self-pardon. But not just that. I think what we are likely to see in the next 4 or 5 days before this president exits stage right is whether he will pardon members of his family, whether he will pardon Rudy Giuliani, whether he will pardon Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. That, to me, is going to be a saga that's going to play out in compelling terms over the next several days, Cam.
We will watch that, Brian, and I didn't know among your many distinguished titles that you had a GED in cosmetology. That's amazing to me. I learn something about you every time. I appreciate you, sir. Always good to see you.
Thank you, Cam.
Looking forward to hearing from you here on KPRC during the weeks ahead. I know we'll have a lot to talk about going forward.